Welcome to the Rabbi's Message. This is Rabbi Elazar Bogomilsky bringing you a weekly Torah portion message. The name of this week's Torah portion is from the book of Exodus, known as the book of Shemot, and it's the second Torah portion, known as Va'era. What's interesting in this week's Torah portion, we begin to see the interaction between Pharaoh and the Jewish people, and how Moses steps up as a leader and as the messenger from God delivers plague after warning Pharaoh, allow the Jewish people to leave the land of Egypt, enough of this harsh slavery, and please allow them to live a free life. And plague after plague takes place. What's interesting is, one of the unique things we learn in this week's Torah portion, when we discuss the plagues, and Moses is given descriptive ideas and directions of exactly how to perform each plague. When it comes to the plague, the first plague, known as Dam, when all the water and the Nile River turned into blood, Moses tells God, I can't do this one. I can't. And the question is why? Was Moses physically not able to carry out this will of God? God gave clear directions. Take your staff and go ahead, smite the Nile River, and all the water will turn into blood. And when we look at the verse, we find that Aaron, his older brother, is actually the one that does that action. And the question is, of course, why? Why is it that such a simple act, and more importantly, what is the message, and what is the importance of the Torah teaching us this unique episode, this story? You know, one of the things that we learn and we walk away from this week's Torah portion is the concept of gratitude, is the importance of saying thank you. You know, so many people go through life and say to themselves, I don't really have to say thank you to you. You're not doing this for me, but children say this to their parents. I didn't choose to come to this world. You had me. I have to go ahead and say thank you. You should thank me. And this expresses itself in many different ways. There are those that go through life with no gratitude, no appreciation, no simple thank you. In Yiddish, we call it a dank. You acknowledge. You're aware of what you have is a blessing. And therefore you say, thank you. You didn't have to do this for me, but you did it, and I appreciate it. Interesting, when we come to the plagues, and here is a direct order from God, turning to Moses, and says, Moses, this is what I want you to carry out to do. I want you to hit the Nile River, and it's going to turn into blood. And yet we find that Moses says, I can't. And he hands off that task to his older brother Aaron. One of the explanations given is a very simple and beautiful explanation, and that is that Moses was saved by the Nile River. If you know the story of the history of Moses' upbringing from an early child, from a little infant, when the decree came out that all the males that are born should be thrown into the Nile River, his mother, Yocheved, went ahead and formed a little basket and placed Moshe in the basket, and his older sister Miriam was standing and looking alongside the shore. And the daughter of Pharaoh came and saw this little infant within the basket, and brought Moses into the palace and raised Moses. Hence the word Moshe. Moshe means that from the water, min hamayim mishisihu, which means that the daughter of Pharaoh said, her name was Batya, I have drawn you from the water. So the question is, why is it that Moses did not want to hit the Nile River? Simply, the answer is because he was saved. And Moses wanted to show gratitude. He wanted to say thank you. How can I go ahead and transform your existence from clean, beautiful nourishment, which we know the Nile River was the nutrition and the nourishment for the entire land of Egypt? How can I transform that and turn it into blood when you saved my life? So Aaron had to carry on and carry out that task. Gratitude is an important virtue. Saying thank you and acknowledging and realizing the importance of why we exist and why we're here. Every part of life is a blessing. You know, they say a story of a great rabbi known as the Chafetz Chaim. There was a rabbi once by the name of Rabbi Elazar Bogomilsky, and he used to go ahead and raise funds for the Jewish schools. That was at the time in England. And he one time visited one of the wealthiest Jews in London. The man was a very well-known contributor to many different Jewish educational institutions. And the man himself was not a very religious person. Not a person that cared much about Jewish education per se, in his own practice, but believed very much in funding it. And what happened was, when this rabbi, known as Lopian, had that meeting to meet with this great philanthropist, he offered him sort of a nice warm tea, and he said, take a seat. And Rabbi Lopian went ahead and asked him a question. And he said, I don't understand this. I see that you're not at all an observant Jew. You live a completely secular life. You have absolutely nothing to do, per se, with Judaism. Why is it that till this very day, you're so passionate and you care so much about supporting Jewish education? Tell me. Explain to me why. And this philanthropist sat back and said, let me tell you a story. Going back, my parents were very wealthy and they were religious. But I, per se, was a very rebellious student. I was rebellious to them. I was rebellious in school. This was in the early 20s, when many Jewish youths left their Jewish heritage. And my parents felt that in order to give me that security that, hey, one last try, we're going to try to give this young man a Jewish education, my parents went to the famous yeshiva of the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim was a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan. He passed away in 1933. He was one of the great luminaries of his generation. And this was in the city in Poland called the city of Radin. Very famous Polish city. And what happened was, I wasn't really interested. But nevertheless, my parents said, take the exam and let's see if you're fit to go into this yeshiva. But obviously, because I wasn't interested, I failed this exam with flying colors. But I did have one request. Even though I failed and seemingly I was not able to go into the yeshiva, into this educational institution, Jewish educational institution, I had one request, and that was that if there's any way possible I can sleep overnight one day in this dormitory of this Jewish. So the rabbi who interviewed me said I have to think about it. He was worried that if he sort of took me into the yeshiva for one night, I would sort of blame my whole non-religious interaction on him. And he was worried that because I had such a bad experience and a taste in my mouth of Judaism, through the course of that night and the next day, I would sort of influence the other students to say, "What are you doing? This is nonsense." And therefore he consulted with the Chafetz Chaim. What should he do? But he consulted it in my presence. And the Chafetz Chaim replied as follows. He said, a boy that cannot be in the dormitory for a year can't be there for even one night. But that does not mean that he cannot stay in my own home. This is what the Chafetz Chaim, this great scholar, said. In the dormitory, he can't stay. He needs a place to stay, no worries. He's welcome to stay in my own home. And this man continues to say this story. He says, the Chafetz Chaim took me into his home, and he fed me as if I was his own child. He made me a bed, and I went to sleep. A few hours later, in the middle of the night, I heard the door open, and the old man was sort of muttering, and he said, "Oh my gosh, it is so cold in this house." And he felt so bad. And with that, he took off his long rabbinical coat, and he put it on top of me and tucked me in. And he said, I quote as follows, "I left the next day, and I never looked back." That's it. Eventually, I left the path of Judaism completely. But one thing I will tell you, that coat that the old man placed on me during that chilly night still gives me warmth today. And that's why, when people come to me for my support, I'm there to support them. It's a simple act of thank you. It's a simple gesture of gratitude, appreciation. So on one hand, we have Moses, who begins to realize that, wait a second, for me to interact and for me to do this simple act of hitting the water, God told me to do so. But wait a second, it saved my life. I have to step back. This is not something I want to do because simply I want to show gratitude. Pharaoh, on the other hand, is the total contrast to that. Pharaoh, we know it says that when Jacob ended up living in the land of Egypt for 17 years, those 17 years, the Nile River rose up to the individual. It was a miracle that took place every single day, as long as Jacob was alive. Pharaoh witnessed this. Pharaoh gave tremendous gratitude and thank you. And when Jacob came, he says, look, I see you're a great person because I see this action. But we find in the actions of Pharaoh, when he had to sort of do his personal, he used it as his personal restroom. The commentaries tell us that Pharaoh didn't hesitate. One of the unique characters of Pharaoh was that to all his servants and the entire kingdom, he would convey himself and express himself and present himself as a god. And therefore, if he's a god, he doesn't have to do his personal chores. He doesn't have to go to the bathroom. He's godly. But what he would do is every single morning, early in the morning, he would do what he has to do, and he would go into the Nile River. That's what the commentaries explain. In fact, the whole episode that Moses greets Pharaoh at the Nile River was to show him and say, wait a second, I know who you are. To the world you express yourself and you present yourself as a godly person. I know you're just a very physical person like me. You're no different. Stop this nonsense. But Pharaoh could not show gratitude. Think about it. Your entire nourishment, everything that sustains life in the land of Egypt, came from the Nile River, yet to disguise yourself as a great godly existence, you'll give it all up on one simple act. The contrast between Moses and Pharaoh. And the lesson is very clear. The lesson is that from this week's Torah portion, one should walk away and understand, wait a second. Thank you doesn't mean for things that transformed and changed the entire world. Gratitude doesn't mean for things that are measurable. You can say, I get it. I have to. Or because there's something in it for me when I say a thank you. True gratitude and appreciation is many times in the small little details of life. In the things in life that most of the time we say, no big deal. Nobody noticed. Who cares? That's easy for you to say, who cares? Your job is not to be the one that decides what's big and what's small. But our job is to understand that the uniqueness of this world is that everything that happens to us is a blessing. And when someone does the smallest favor, to say thank you, 2 simple words, to show gratitude, to be a little bit emotional, and say, I care, I'm committed, I'm invested. So many times parents raise children, and there becomes this rift between the parent and the child. The child feels, it comes to me. You have to. It's your obligation. You signed up for this. And the parent feels, I provide this. I do this. And because I do this, you have to do that. Imagine if we can sort of change that paradigm and change it a little bit and say, wait a second. There's gratitude here. Moses taught us the uniqueness of how to be appreciative for every little aspect of life. Even when comes God and says, I want you to do so, Moses says, I can't. I can't do it simply because this has been the favor of my life. They've been aided in making me who I am today. And I think if we walk away with this lesson, and we begin to realize that every action that we do, every thought that we have, every teacher from the youngest age we enter the school, the rabbis teach us, Ezehu chacham halomed mikol adam. Who is the wise person? The one that learns from every individual. There isn't a person that you can walk away and be inspired and learn some sort of lesson. What I'm hoping is that the message is crystal clear. Let us all show gratitude and let's celebrate week after week with only joy and happiness. You're listening to the Rabbi's Message. We'll be back same time, same place next week.